Welcome back to Baltimore Birdwatchers. I'm Nikhil Mehta. With me, as always, is Daniel Rotter. We were both at opening day today, and after such a fun game, we thought we'd get right on and put together our instant reaction. Daniel, how did it feel to be back in Camden Yards?
Oh man, it felt great. The energy was honestly electric at Camden Yards. Coming from people who went to the playoff games as well, the energy at opening day was pretty easily better than those for the playoff games. And I know that people could plan out going to opening day a little bit better, a little more in advance, which was probably why. So even though the stakes were a lot lower, I think that the energy was better than what we saw at the end of the year last year.
Yeah, I think it's funny, like the fan base. I think you could say that the vibes through February and March were not the best. Injuries, not feeling like the pitching was there, but that kind of all fades away when it's time for opening day, and everyone's like, you know what, we're here for opening day. And obviously, when the game goes as well as it did, Orioles won the game. Kind of a funny offensive box score, which we're going to get to. Kind of a funny game overall, in my opinion. But when they win on the home opener, that kind of like, all right, that's just like one checkbox. And it doesn't like a win tomorrow, I'm sure would feel good, but maybe not quite as good as getting that first home game open after all the festivities, all the ceremonies, introducing everyone, which is always a lot of fun to just, everyone on the coaching staff, they get their chance to shine, everyone on the roster. And I think that is kind of undeniable no matter how pessimistic you want to be about this team, which some people really want to be pessimistic about this team. Opening day, winning the home opener is just undeniable. So I agree. I agree about the vibes. I was at Pickles beforehand. That was packed. Uh, I think it's just a matter of people love being at the ballpark. People love being at Camden Yards. And so they got the win. K Povich's first start of the season went okay. Obviously, it didn't go super deep into the game. What did you think of Povich today?
Well, I feel like one of the things that I've been saying about Povich and why I don't know about his ceiling is that I don't know if he's going to be able to miss a lot of bats, but he certainly showed the ability to do that today. I think the thing that he's going to need to figure out if he is going to kind of go through this approach of trying to get a lot of strikeouts is he seemed to kind of be very picky, very much trying to hit the corners. He got into a lot of deep counts, which is why his pitch count got run up so high. He didn't even make it through five, and he had thrown over 90 pitches. So it did look like he was nibbling. That was the term I was looking for. Definitely nibbling, trying to find his spots. But look, I mean, 8 Ks in 4 1/3 innings. That shows you that this guy has some real swing and miss potential that we didn't get to see as much last year. So overall, even though there were a lot of hard hit balls as well, none of them were home runs. And I mean, look, he showed a strikeout potential that we didn't really see from him last year. So overall, I'm encouraged, even though he wasn't necessarily the most efficient.
Yeah. I think, especially his first start of the season, it's not surprising that he's a little more cautious, and really trying to miss bats instead of, he didn't really induce that much soft contact throughout the game. Even some of the outs were harder hit balls. And getting 8 Ks with that is kind of an interesting result. Like they're either getting good contact or they're missing completely. And there's a lot of variance in that over the course of a season as a starting pitcher. But like you said, having that swing and miss potential and getting those and getting 8 strikeouts and 4 1/3 is certainly not quite what I was expecting from him today. I think the rest of the stat line, 5 hits, 3 earned, 2 walks, was around what I would be expecting from him on this game, albeit ideally in 5 or more innings. But then the 8 strikeouts is a really good sign that there's more that he can build on. The offense, like I said, I just thought it was a very funny box score. They scored 4 runs in the first inning. They grounded into at least 3 double plays from between the second and the seventh, and then bottom of the eighth added those 4 insurance runs, that ended up being important. So it was really good to see them play some small ball after so many home runs in the first few games, and just keep rallies going. I mean, Newcomb was really just giving them a lot of pitches they could make clean contact with in that first inning. And then in the eighth inning, I thought Heston Kjerstad in particular, I thought that was a really good situational hitting where he wasn't trying to slam one into the gap. He was just trying to get it over the infield that was in. And I thought that's really good situational hitting from such a young player who is really hasn't been given a chance to settle into a rhythm this season.
And it shows some good mental toughness from Kjerstad too, right? Because he hasn't really ever had an established role with this team, and now today it seems like this is as good of a chance as any for him with the news that we're about to get to. But to be honest with you, he had some pretty ugly at bats leading up to that one in this game. So, I don't think anyone in his shoes would necessarily go up there thinking like, oh, I'm just going to do a job. I'm just going to poke the ball the other way. He obviously wants to impress the team. And, he has this thunderous power that has carried him all the way up here. I'm sure many people in his shoes would be thinking, I'm going to drive one into the gap. I'm going to put one over the fence. I'm going to swing hard. But he just went with the pitch, took it the other way, and got a really big RBI knock to keep the line moving. So I think that it's going to take a little bit of time with Kjerstad because, like we said, he hasn't had the chance to have an established role in the big leagues yet. And there are going to be some struggles that come with that. But give him 2, 3 weeks, and hopefully we really start to see those ugly strikeouts dwindle, and he's making more and more hard contact because this guy has proven it at the second highest level in professional baseball that he can dominate offensively. So the potential's there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point about him having those tough at bats before and then coming up and, two strikeouts and I think a weak ground out or a weak pop out, and then coming up and knowing what he needs to do in that situation is really good. Because I think when he came up, I not not like not worried, but I was thinking, we've seen how many of these young guys in big situations come up and take these huge cuts, and you really just poked one the other way. I thought it was just a great at bat. Hopefully, a confidence builder. I'm sure he got praise from that, from teammates, certainly coaches in the locker room for his approach there. The Orioles would love to see that out of a guy like that because the issue I felt like with the lineup during parts of last season was that they would get to Holliday, Kjerstad, they'd get to some of the younger guys, and it would just be a hole there if you had runners on base because they were really trying to come up and I don't think it's like necessarily like they're trying to make their mark in the big leagues, but they're doing what they know, which is hitting balls really hard. But when every run matters, which every run did end up mattering in this game, you got to be able to come up and put your other at bats aside and put your ambitions about hitting the ball 500 feet aside and just get one over. And that's exactly what Kjerstad did. Before we move on to kind of a look at the overall start to the season, I also wanted to talk about Hyde's use of relievers today. Obviously, with the day off tomorrow, gave him a lot more freedom to just let guys really go for one inning after Povich was only able to get through four and a third. Particularly bringing in Batista after that bottom of the eighth rally. I think when the Orioles scored those 4 runs to put it out of a save situation, I was really curious to see if Hyde was going to sit Batista back down and bring. I think he had Cionel Perez up in the pen, and they have the day off tomorrow, but it wasn't a save situation. It's the first game back at home. It's the first game for Felix back at home, and you know that does play a role in a manager's thinking, not just in terms of, Felix deserves this, but also let's get Felix back and comfortable. And so I'm kind of torn. I think I was kind of hoping Felix would sit down. Not that I didn't want to see him pitch, but just he didn't need to pitch in that situation. And then he comes in, he gives up the runs. What was your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it definitely was a bit of a gesture of respect, right? Everyone knows that he's so beloved by the fans for that tremendous 2023. And I think even though the game went out of reach, it was pretty apparent that he was going to get a huge reception from the crowd, and he had already, warmed up fully. So, do we want to get another guy in there throwing more pitches who we might need next game? We've already used a lot of our bullpen. I definitely see what you mean because I was thinking the same thing. Like we want to keep this guy's arm as fresh as possible after all that he went through in his recovery process. And like I've said, I think on our last podcast, just because he's so big, he's not like every pitcher who's gotten Tommy John. He has really long levers, so it's a lot of stress on these ligaments, maybe more so than most other pitchers. I think ultimately I'm pretty fine with the decision to bring him in because it ended up being kind of a lower leverage role for him to work through some of the kinks and also kind of that adrenaline rush that comes with the closer's role. Even though it wasn't a save situation, it was a, oh, the entire stadium is up on their feet applauding for me when I come in. They had lofty expectations for me. And while he gave up a lot of contact and it wasn't necessarily his best showing, I'm fine with it. I'm a little worried with the amount of pitches he ended up throwing. I think he threw like 25 pitches in the outing after he had an extended warm up in the bullpen too. So I don't think we'll see him honestly even on Wednesday. If I was managing the team, I wouldn't use him again until Thursday. But I think it was pretty justified to put him in.
Yeah, you kind of read my mind. You mentioned the pitch total, 26 pitches, only 26 of which were strikes. I think I think Felix deserved that moment, and I think that having the day off tomorrow and the fact that he didn't pitch the day before either puts you in the position where you can maybe do something that I don't know. I wouldn't say it was like the wrong baseball decision, but it wouldn't maybe be what you would do on any other game. In any other game, I think Perez comes back, or Perez comes back in there and closes that out. In this game, it's, yeah, you let Felix come in. Like you said, it's his first time back at home and just the emotional rush that comes with that, which, kind of evident when he threw, less than half of his pitches were strikes. And let him come in, get through that one, and yeah, I think ideally you're not in a situation where you need him to pitch on Wednesday. Again, like I said, the fact they had the day off gives you the ability to go ahead and do what is kind of the more fun gesture. It is the that was the moment that everyone was kind of hoping coming into the game that they would get to see Felix. And so I'm glad that Hyde put him in, but I completely think you're right about how they should use him this season. No back-to-backs. Any games like this where he pitches a lot, where he throws a lot of pitches, try and give him 2 days off. And I hope they really stick to that as far into the season as they can. I would imagine August, September is really the point where you would start thinking about using him back to back. Other thoughts on the starts of the season? Colton Cowser landing on the IL. I think we saw a report today that said he would be out for about 2 months. He had a thumb fracture. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Daniel. You mentioned that means a lot for Kerstad. He is going to get way more opportunities to play as a result of this. And ideally, he can take this time to develop the confidence and develop the comfort that he needs to really develop in the major leagues.
Yeah, and as far as Cowser getting injured goes, I definitely commend the hustle. The guy plays with a lot of heart, but it's just almost, I think, inexplicable to head first dive into first base on the fourth game of the season. There's just so many ways that could go wrong. And I mean, he did jam his thumb and break it, but at the same time, when he put his hand on the bag, all that momentum kind of made his hand drift to the left. And he almost got spiked on the hand at the same time as well. There's definitely a time and a place for that in a super big game. I guess he dove because he thought he was going to get tagged, and that's why he decided to lay out. But I just think over the course of 162, like, so what if it's an infield ground out? Like, we need your bat in the lineup over the next month more than we need you to dive headfirst in the first base to beat out this ground ball. Um, obviously, again, really respect the hustle. Guy plays with a lot of heart, but I think that was kind of dumb. And then,
I agree. It was
so
it was
as far as his replacement, I mean, we bring up Dylan Carlson, but certainly there's a little bit of an unknown with Gunnar Henderson coming back on Thursday, and I'm sure we can incorporate that discussion in as well as to who might go later in the pod.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one thing actually I would talk about that right now. It was the top of the seventh inning. It's a one-run game, no outs. It's to me, it's just not a situation where you're diving headfirst into the bag. I think we've seen, I'm with you. I love the hustle, but to me, it's like it's a situation where like you can get out there. I think it was like a little bit of close play. He might have been trying to like step on, maybe avoid hitting the first baseman or something like that. But to me, I just think you're right. I think it was a silly thing to do. And you mentioned Gunner coming back. Yeah, I don't know exactly how they're gonna handle that. Holiday has been hitting pretty well to start the season. He's batting 316. He's been striking out a lot. He struck out 8 times. But that's just gonna be part of the natural growth curve, and I don't think there's any way around that. So, but Urias has hit pretty well. Westberg has hit pretty well, and so again, you have this logjam in the with those three infield spots where obviously Gunner's going to be in this lineup. But then who do you take out? Obviously, they can play righty lefty with Holiday and Arias. I would imagine they do something. I would imagine they do that. But I don't know what they do with the roster spot.
Well, and we had just had this discussion previously, and we both kind of agreed that we thought that Jorge Mateo was the guy most likely to stay. I don't know if it appears that way anymore, just because Ramon Arias has been off to such a strong start this season. I mean, he has been picking up a lot of clutch base hits. Looking at the options tracker, it appears that Mateo can still be optioned. Arias would have to be DFA'd. So
I just don't think they're doing that
I
at this point in the season. I don't think they're doing that this early with Arias when there's one, he's hitting well. He ended last season pretty strong. And I think there's a legitimate chance that another team picks him up, and the Orioles probably wouldn't want that. I think you could also it also is a question of how much do you trust Mateo to play outfield other than center. If you trust him to play more outfield, then you might be able to keep him an option. You could send Carlson back down, but I don't know if he has any options left. But or Ramon Laureano. I think you could option either of those guys down if you needed to. But that means you have to be okay with Mateo playing outfield and or Kerstad playing a lot.
well, that's kind of another thing I'm worried about is if Kerstad is the one who gets optioned because he has options and we want Mateo's defensive versatility. It would really suck and it would really stunt his development and hurt his overall trade value. But it doesn't feel like an impossible scenario because I just feel like there's no way Laureano, after signing a $4 million major league deal, gets moved off the roster. I don't even know if he can be sent to the minor leagues. He might have to be DFA'd. He is on a major league free agent deal. And then as far as Carlson goes, I mean, he might not get picked up if he got DFA'd. It's not impossible. We did sign him for less than $1 million this offseason. So it kind of feels like it's between Mateo and Kerstad. And I think to keep Kerstad, we have to be really confident that he's going to get a lot of playing time. And I think that role is there. So then seems like Mateo is the guy, which hurts our bench, I think, hurts our speed off the bench. We have a speedy starting lineup, but not a lot of speed on the bench, so it does make us a little less versatile
And
for
with
the time
Cowser
being.
gone, Mullins is going to be playing every day, and you're never going to have Mullins off the bench either. So I'm very you I think you did a really good job breaking it down. I think it's a very interesting decision and says a lot about how they see all these different players coming into the season when you have to make a roster decision like this. Albert Suarez also landing on the IL, which brings Bowman back, which was a guy who I talked about in a recent episode, who looked good in his 2 innings today, or his two batters today. It wasn't obviously pretty small sample size there, but obviously he was the next guys up. Shigano did not seem major, seemed like it was hand cramps. And hopefully, that's that for in terms of injury. Hopefully, it doesn't expand to anything more. Really impressive start, I felt like well, I guess we'll start with Mullen since we were just talking about him. 4 RBIs today, 10 on the season. Really impressive start from him. Very, very encouraging. I think it's still hard to see him getting back to maybe where he was at the peak a couple years ago. But he, to me, has been the surprise of the end of last season to now. Him and Rios, honestly, both hitting very well, playing solid defense, making it clear that they were never just placeholders for all the young guys on the rosters, which is just I think interesting to see. Um, it's just interesting to see Mullins, especially with the RBIs. He's hitting further down the lineup. There are more opportunities with guys ahead of him, and he's really delivering.
The big reason for the offense being so poor down the stretch was because the bottom of our lineup was giving us almost no production. And we know that Cedric Mullins is a talented hitter. Everyone has seen him be a productive hitter, but in at the end of the 2024 season, we were starting to have our doubts, right? We didn't know if the skills were fading, if he was just kind of not that season or that time where he was hitting well was more of a I don't want to say a fluke because it did carry over for more than one season, but if he's maybe a little bit over the hill now offensively, but no, he's been making a lot of hard contact. He's been doing it in clutch situations too. As far as today goes on opening day, right? In the first inning, had a massive, massive 2 RBI hit in the first inning that really helped establish the tone of the game. And considering the Red Sox came back and matched it at 4-3 not too long after, that just felt really big to know that we had the lead for the majority of the game. And if Mullins had not gotten that hit, like what happened in Sunday's game in Toronto, where so many runners were stranded, I don't know if that eighth inning rally necessarily is as, as possible without that confidence that we have the lead and that we can kind of just swing away and don't need to be pressing up there at the plate.
Yeah, and I think him providing what he does on defense, on the base paths, when you're able to get these kind of contributions from him at the bottom of the lineup because your names like Rutschman, O'Neill, and Westberg are hitting really well at the top, that's the balance to me this offense needs. Um, I mentioned O'Neill and Westberg. Adley has had a really nice start, but O'Neill and Westberg are hitting the cover off the ball. I mean, O'Neill, it is obviously this is a small sample size. We're very and that's like kind of important to remember when you get excited about a free agent signing to start to the season. But it feels good, and it's a confidence builder. It's something that says, look, like this guy's coming in and delivering. He's not just swinging for the fences. I felt like he not accurately, but came in pegged a little bit as a pure power guy, and he's really a good hitter, very pretty balanced hitter. Um, and um, I think he so far is probably the best free agent signing of the offseason by any team based on purely this small sample size.
Based on your extreme recency
Right.
bias. No, he's been tremendous. And the thing about him is he's been a good major league hitter for much of his career. The issue has just been health the whole time. He's only played 100 games or more twice in his 8-year major league career. So it's all about keeping the body healthy. In the seasons that he has played 100 games, he has hit 30 home runs. He played 113 games last year and hit 31. He played 138 in 2021, hit 34 bombs, and oh, by the way, hit 286. So the guy has serious offensive upside. It's just, can he stay healthy, really?
Yeah. And this is the kind of start that makes you at least just feel like, okay, this guy is going to be something of what we're paying him to be. Like obviously it's a small sample size and who knows what could happen after this, but um him batting where he is in the lineup, consistently keeping those rallies going, fantastic. Westberg also hitting really well. Um Not surprising. I think Westberg is just a pretty slept on guy just because he doesn't have the profile of Holliday or Henderson in the infield or Rutschman even at catcher. But I think the people who follow Orioles baseball and follow these guys developed through the minors really know that Westberg is just a complete hitter up at the plate. He's got a good approach, good discipline. He's not super fast, but he's got plenty of speed, and he can really rope the ball when he barrels it.
Yeah, with Westbrook, it's kind of funny because his lack of personality compared to a lot of the other guys on the team kind of makes a lot of people describe him as almost an oatmeal-y type of guy. Like, oh, he's just a grinder. He's a baseball-y player. But I mean, he has a lot of upside himself, and I think that a lot of people fail to realize that because he's just not as outgoing of a personality on the team as a lot of the other guys. But man, I mean, he's a talented hitter, and in Toronto, he certainly showed it. I think the one thing I'm concerned about is kind of what's going on with him, right? On Sunday, he missed the game for reasons that were undisclosed. We know he was having back problems in spring training. I can't help but think that might be related, considering we were provided no other context. And if he's missing a game in the fourth game of the season because of something undisclosed bothering him, that almost makes me think, oh God, by the end of the first half, there's got to be an IL stint coming, right? If 4 games into the season, he's asking for a day off and can only be used in an emergency.
Yeah, Hyde basically said, I think before today's game, that they just want to give him a day off because he was a little banged up during spring training, the turf, and I think he mentioned the turf, and he mentioned kind of the truncated spring training that Westberg had with the back thing. And so, um, yeah, it's one of those things where you're just like, if he needs the occasional day off, that's fine, give it to him because like you said with O'Neill, the goal is longevity. I mean, and I think already with injuries popping up on this team, both in the pitching rotation, bullpen, and the starting lineup, um, you you do have to prioritize the long run of how many games you play these guys for. And remember, this is a case where you do have that logjam in the infield of guys that the guys that you want to play. You want Westberg to play. Urias is hitting. You want Holliday to play. You want Urias to play. He's hitting. Obviously, Henderson's going to be playing pretty much every day, and so you can afford to give Westberg those days off. You should, and you just got to hope that that is enough to. Hopefully, it's not like a nagging problem or anything that's hampering him while he's playing. If he just gets the rest regularly, we mentioned Holiday. He's hitting well, also striking out a lot. Pretty much what I expected from him to start the year. I thought that he would make some good contact, but he would also have plenty of whiffs just as he continues to get adjusted to major league pitching. Any other thoughts on Holiday to start the year?
Yeah, I love that he's sticking with the toe tap. I do think that that is something that's going to be more conducive of success for him as a young player while he's still kind of perfecting his timing. The one thing for me I noticed is, and this is strictly observational, I do kind of feel like I'm going to use some kind of more baseball hitting coach type of lingo. I feel like he's pulling out a little bit with his chest. Like he's stepping in the bucket a little bit on his stride, particularly against lefties. I noticed this against Toronto. I feel like his front side is not necessarily keeping him in it and willing to push balls the other way. That's not to say he hasn't done it at all this season, but it's something I do think I would like to see because when we saw him in those lefty lefty matchups, I just felt like he was kind of bailing a little bit in his swing, which I think is going to allow him to be exploited a bit more on the outer half. So again, really encouraging results so far. And look, I don't even, I'm not a hitting coach for the Orioles. I'm sure they're seeing all of these things that I'm seeing and they're going to work with him. And I'm sure it's just going to take a lot of reps because, I mean, he's facing same-handed guys throwing, wicked off-speed pitches at him. And it's just kind of a natural impulse to want to kind of dive out of the way a little bit. So it might take a little bit of time. But overall, I think the timing was the biggest thing for him, and the toe tap is really helping him produce a lot more than he was last year because his timing was so off. But that is a little tweak that I noticed watching the game, and I think it's something that allows him to be a little bit exploited until that gets corrected a bit more.
Yeah, and you mentioned the toe tap, and I think that's also an example of, he comes across as this wonderkin, this natural genetic talent who's just naturally amazing at hitting baseballs. And that's partially true, but he is also a technician. Like that toe tap was part of really careful observation and careful work with the Orioles batting coaches to figure out exactly, how he wanted to change his swing. So I think that you're right that the Orioles hitting coaches are probably seeing similar things, and they're going to work on improvements throughout the season. And Holiday's shown a willingness to be coached and improve himself beyond just being a natural talent. And so I think that obviously it would be good if he had a perfect swing, but no one does. And so I think his willingness to work and keep getting better, that's something I definitely want to check in on with you later in the season if you see it later on in the season. Pitching, just one quality start from the starting rotation to start the year with Zach Eflin on opening day. Dean Kramer and Charlie Morton did not look very good in their two starts. Thomas Shigano, like we mentioned, left his start early. That seemed to be a minor thing, and hopefully was just hand cramps and not something that will extend farther. And then Povich today, which we talked about quite a bit. This is pretty much again what we expected. This is what we talked about in our last pod, that Eflin's going to come out and give you a good start every go around, but the rest of the guys, you're going to kind of hope to get maybe two good starts out of the rest of the four per cycle, which is really not a great place to be in, but that's what happens when your ace goes down before the season even starts. I did feel like the bullpen has been pretty good so far. Suarez, Aiken, Baker, Bowman, Cano, Dominguez, and Soto have combined for zero earned runs across 15 and a third. Again, this is a small sample size to start the season, but it is encouraging to me for two reasons. One, you know you're going to have the struggles with the starters, and to see the relievers really be ready to come in and pitch, multiple days in a row, pitch 2 out of 3 days, pitch more than one inning. To get through this first rotation, as worrying as that was, the bullpen helped win those games, and that makes you feel a little bit better about their ability to deliver throughout the season. And two, I think it also says that Hyde did a good job managing this bullpen over the first 5 games. I doubt he was expecting to have to throw them as much as he did with all of these guys. It's the first start of the season. I would say you probably are expecting at least 5 innings out of all of your guys, and not everyone even, and I think, or ideally six, and I think, like I said, only Eflin will pitch six. So Hyde's management of the bullpen I thought was also very good. And so those two things combined, it's you don't want to be in this situation, but when you are in this situation, having your manager know your bullpen and your bullpen really come in ready at the beginning of the season to just get outs is really encouraging.
And there's a lot of veterans in the bullpen too. There's really no totally inexperienced pitchers in the bullpen right now, which is probably helping get off to this kind of not so shaky start, right? There's nobody who's walking on any sort of broken glass as far as their time in the major leagues being endangered, because we need all of these veterans in our bullpen. And having watched the majority of the game so far in their entirety, I haven't really had any gripes with how the bullpen's been managed either. I think that overall I've liked how pitchers have been deployed so far, so I don't really have a whole lot to say about that. As far as the starting pitching goes, I think that Sugano is going to be a bit of a head case this year based on his first start. So in the first batter in the start, he misses badly on all four pitches, and the batter draws a first pitch walk. And I'm thinking to myself, oh God, man, this is the guy who's supposed to have the otherworldly control. And we didn't see it in the first inning. He kind of settled down, but it was kind of hard not to notice how drenched in sweat the guy was after just a couple innings as well. Clearly so worked up on the inside about this game. And then he leaves the game before the fifth inning with hand cramps because he's lost so much fluid in his body. He's playing in a climate controlled dome, dude. Like, what is going to happen when it's 95 degrees outside in July? I,
Okay,
I,
I'll admit I didn't think
I
about
don't
it
know
quite
what
that
to
hard,
expect
but
from him.
no, I didn't think about it quite that hard, but I think you're right. It is kind of funny. I also noticed like Roki Sasaki, man, like that a tough start to his Major League Baseball career in LA. And it does show, I think we mentioned it last time, the Japanese league is the second best league in the world, but there is still a pretty substantial gap. And um, the gap is there's a talent gap. The really substantial gap is the pressure. To me, is the pressure because there's way more money involved. There are way more people involved. There are national analysts talking about your every move. I know baseball is still very popular in Japan, but the media in Japan is not as aggressive, and the fans aren't as not passionate, but I'm trying to think of the right word, passionate with a negative connotation. There's just so much pressure for these guys coming over from Japan, especially a guy who's 35 years old and isn't going to get a long runway to build a career in Major League Baseball. He's going to have hopefully, I hope as many seasons as he wants, but he's 35. It's not going to be like Sasaki, who's really going to get to play out a full career in the MLB. So I I'll admit I didn't think about it quite that hard, and then connecting obviously the hand cramps to losing so much fluid is um, kind of amusing, but hopefully it's the kind of thing where he settles down and remembers that he's a veteran in a way. Like he has to remember that yes, these are major league hitters, and the average talent might be above what you're used to facing. And maybe it's more pressure to prove yourself elsewhere. You're far away from home. There are a lot of factors in there, but at the core of it is he's a veteran pitcher whose game is all mental. And so on the one side, it's not good to see him. I don't want to say fall apart, but not be able to really withstand the first outing. But at the same time, I hope that him remembering who he is as a pitcher is going to help him as he goes through the season and develops. Again, I'm high on Sugano, so maybe I'm just being hopeful here.
Yeah, well, and to his credit, I think that he actually bounced back from those early innings pretty well and honestly looked like one of our more encouraging pitchers in the first run through the rotation after that. Because Morton was getting shelled, quite honestly.
Yep.
He was giving up tons of hard contact. Kramer didn't pitch well in the beginning. It didn't end well for him. In the middle, there were some decent innings, and that's kind of the Dean Kramer experience usually.
I was
And
about to
Povich,
say
look, the
exactly the same
strikeouts
thing.
we said were encouraging, but there were still a lot of hard hit balls. So Sagano, I mean, I hope that he can kind of avoid the meltdown in the first inning as he gets more comfortable. But hopefully he's just not putting too much pressure on himself, like you said, because that meltdown felt incredibly mental.
And this is where coaching and his teammates, that's all going to come in. And I think I said in our podcast that I was expecting him to have a little bit of a slow start just as he adjusts to the major league games. I think he's going to be cautious and nibbling around the edges as he tries to kind of establish how he's going to approach these hitters. Certainly wasn't expecting quite what happened, but I think over the course of the season, once he gets a little bit more comfortable, he'll be able to just remember who he is, remember the type of pitcher that he is, and that pitcher is like um built to withstand adversity because you're not just relying on your ability to throw a ball really hard. It's all about the mental, and that's something that you can control. It's just a matter of getting comfortable. So Orioles are top five in hitting average, OPS, on base slugging, bottom 10 in WHIP, ERA, and average allowed. Which, yeah, I mean that's pretty much what you expect out of this roster to start. That's obviously you want the pitching to improve, but the hitting has been really good to start the season.
And seeing as though we're top five in average, a lot of that has been buoyed by some unexpected production from the guys we talked about, Arias, Mullins, O'Neill hitting 571. We don't even have our best player right now, and we're doing that. So there will certainly be more regression to the mean. We'll be getting our potentially best hitting for average player back, but also O'Neill does strike out a lot, or at least he did last year. And Ramon Arias is not a 400 hitter, unfortunately, as much as I would like to comp him to Ted Williams. And Cedric Mullins had his issues as well, swinging the bat in the second half last year. So we'll
Andrew
see
Losing
everything
Cowser.
kind of even out. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
Kaiser.
yeah. So, you hope it all even out. I will say it was this has been almost exactly what I was expecting out of this team to start the season, which is reassuring in a way because you're like, okay, they're coming in, they're hitting. The pitching is not great, but you weren't expecting the pitching to be great, and I was expecting the hitting to be good. This is a good lineup, and they are delivering on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a quick peek at their schedule for some of the coming days here. They're at home. They finished this 3-game series against the Red Sox. Wednesday and Thursday of this week before going on a road trip. They're on the road a lot to start the season with the trip to Kansas City and then Arizona, and then they have a nice long homestand that I think we're going to get to a game or two at. Any other major thoughts? I mean, it was great to be back. The team looks good. The vibes felt good. I don't know how much more you can ask for on the home opener.
I'm really intrigued to see us face some seriously bona fide pitching, which is coming up for us on the schedule. On Wednesday, we're facing Garrett Crochet, who last year had some of the best stuff in all of MLB. We know the Royals have pitchers who stymied us in the playoffs last year. I don't necessarily know if Reagans or Lugo are lined up against us right now. And then you go to Arizona, and their pitching staff is among the best in the league as well. I don't know if we'll get to see Corbin Burns, but they have Gallen, they have Merrill Kelly, who is a solid innings eating, but like skillful innings eating veteran, not a bad pitcher. Brandon Pfaadt is a younger guy with some upside, and Eduardo Rodriguez, he's been injured a lot lately, but just a few years ago, this guy was considered an above average pitcher. So the Diamondbacks have very good pitching staff. Also, the back end of their bullpen is very good. So we're going to get to see them face more quality pitching that I don't think Toronto has either. I think their pitching is a little bit weak, and that was pretty evident when we faced them. And we dumped some runs on them in a couple games. And even the game that we didn't dump runs on them in, we got 9 hits in the game that we only scored 1 run, and the game started by Chris Bassett. Like, I'm interested to see how this lineup performs against seriously quality pitching, and it starts with Wednesday when we face Crochet.
Yeah, and I think that's, we'll check back in after, the next couple of series and see where all these numbers are. It's a small sample size. I know that I've said that a ton of times. It's important to remember. And I think getting to see what the Orioles do against that, do we know exactly when Gunner's going to be back?
Thursday, apparently.
Thursday. Okay, so we'll have him for that series. He probably will be back to playing every day by the end of that road trip, I would imagine, and they'll really have a good idea of how they're going to perform against some of the better pitching. And I'm, really excited for those matchups. It's a good opportunity. I don't think those lineups are good, but they don't scare me too much, and so hopefully it's an opportunity for the hitters to come in and hopefully grind out some wins. I mean, I know it's early in the season and it's not like every single game matters, but I think if you can grind out some wins when you have Cowser and Grayson on the IL, and build as the year goes on, I think that's what's going to help them find a way to win the division. So.
I don't have an issue with how this team has started at all. This is exactly what we expected to happen. We know that we don't have an ace pitcher right now, so obviously everything isn't going to look perfect on the starting pitching side. And with any offense, even one of the best offenses in the league, there's going to be some nights where you don't score 4 runs, you don't score 3 runs. We've already had 2 out of our 5 games where we scored 2 runs or less. And sometimes just doesn't bounce your way in crucial situations. Like I said, even the game where we only scored 1 run, we got 9 hits in the game and just couldn't convert in the clutch. And, quite honestly, there's a big luck element involved in baseball. All you can do is just keep going up there, keep that same approach, hit the ball hard, and you will have better results than the teams that are not hitting the ball hard over a larger sample size.
Yeah, and like we've been saying this whole time, that's the super encouraging thing about the Orioles start the season. The bats are live, and I think that is what's gonna keep this team going throughout the season is the ability to rely on different guys to get hot at different times. So that way it's not just Gunner and Adley at the top of the lineup trying to carry everything like it felt like it was last season. Um, Anyway, thank you, Daniel. I'm glad we were able to hop on, do this podcast right after opening day. Thanks for joining me, and thank you to everyone for listening.
One.